Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever and whenever you are, and welcome to another episode of Take the Points, a true underdog podcast. Hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Hopefully you're getting this on Thursday or Friday morning. It's good to see everybody, good to chat with everybody. As you can tell, it is just going to be me tonight. Steve is preparing for a fun family vacation next week. Wilson is babysitting / taking care of his own son today, which I will refer to as babysitting, which means you are stuck with me. Super, super excited to be able to come on here tonight and chat. We have an absolutely loaded agenda. And I realized before I even came on tonight that it is going to be impossible for me in 60 minutes, a little bit over, a little bit under, to talk about everything that was going on in sports this week. Obviously had a great episode last week. We're so grateful to have Garrett Tyler join us from the Florida Gators, gave us some incredible insight on his experience in winning back-to-back national titles. So Garrett, thank you for joining the show. I hope everybody enjoyed that special episode. It was surely special for me, given that Garrett's part of my family. So Garrett, really appreciate you coming on the pod. But yeah, so what are we going to talk about today? So we'll probably start with a quick update on March Madness. There's a lot that we can unpack there with both Michigan and Michigan State losing last week. I have some, hot takes here on the NIL and transfer portal and all that's going on. Then I definitely want to spend most of the podcast today talking about my favorite day of the year, which is the Detroit Tigers opening day, which is 2 days away. I'm recording this on Wednesday night. The Tigers will play the White Sox in the official home opener on Friday, even though they've had a couple games already, which we can talk about. And we are in the midst of a playoff push, people. We have the Detroit Pistons that are chasing down seeding for the playoffs, which is hard to believe, setting records for the greatest turnaround in NBA history. 7 games to go, so we're going to have to talk about them. And then I also want to touch on the Detroit Red Wings, who are still holding on barely to potential playoff chances. Another disappointing year for the Red Wings, so want to touch on that. And there's going to be some things we can't get to tonight. And one of those that I want to talk about eventually is going to be the Lions. We're at kind of the coaches meeting this week, which took place in West Palm Beach. Dan Campbell spoke. Brad Holmes spoke, Rod the Bod Wood spoke as well. Man, that's a tongue twister. Talk about season tickets, etc. There were some changes to NFL rules. But we just don't have enough time for that tonight because I could be on here for 4 hours talking about all that. So we're going to save that for a future episode. Want to make sure Steve and Wilson can give their insights as well. And yeah, that's kind of going to be the agenda or show sheet tonight. So I think first got to start I want to spend a couple minutes on Michigan State. Their season ultimately ends last week. Both of them losing to Auburn, Michigan, losing in the first game, Michigan State making it to the Elite Eight game, then ultimately losing to Auburn with a chance to go to the Final Four. Have a lot of different thoughts about kind of what went wrong for Michigan State. Obviously, I think a really strong year for Michigan and Dusty May, all things considered. I think they have nothing but themselves to be proud of. And, kudos to Dusty May for really embracing NIL and kind of rebuilding that team on the fly, which we know has become, a challenge given kind of the landscape of college sports today. Michigan State, just super quick. I was really, really pulling for them to pull out that game. Obviously, I always love seeing a, Michigan-based team advance. You can probably tell, definitely have probably a closer affinity to Michigan State here from a basketball perspective. I just respect the hell out of Tom Izzo. Probably heard it in our discussion last week, talking with Steven Wilson, just coming to the defense of Izzo. Billy, friend of the show, got to mention him every episode. Given that he kind of worked for Izzo, I know he said he would take a second national title for Tom Izzo over anything else, any Detroit sports championship, which just shows his level of dedication. But I have to admit, I share in the passion of wanting to see Izzo get that second title and be able to go out on top as a champion. I think in today's NIL, and we're already seeing it this week with, so many transfers that have started. I mean, even in the middle of the tournament, there was, guys transferring already on teams that were advancing. I think that happened to Michigan. But even if you look at this week, right, you have a guy like Trey Holloman, junior guard who, just represents everything there is to represent about Michigan State. Kind of a gutsy guy, sacrificed a lot for the team, was in the starter role, went to the bench. He's crying at the podium after they lose. He goes 0 for 10, had a horrible game. You're thinking, man, can't wait to see this guy next year. Come to find out 2 days later, yeah, I'm entering the portal. We'll be seeing you. Xavier Booker, not a surprise there. Also entered the portal. He's out. Michigan State also losing former 4-star Garrett Normat, I think is his name. Can't pronounce it. Didn't really see a ton of time this year. He's transferring. Then you look on the Michigan side as well. You have Trey Donaldson's going to be transferring out too. So you have, two players there that played integral roles on both Michigan and Michigan State's success, just bouncing, after their team loses. I'm just sick of college sports right now. And maybe that's the old man inside of me. We talked a little bit about it last year with just how we can maybe fix NIL and does there need to be contracts involved. But as a, fan of college football, a fan of college basketball as well, when these seasons starts, outside of the teams I obviously follow super closely, like a Michigan or Michigan State, there's no, name recognition I have anymore because guys are just jumping, bouncing from team to team. And it's really going to be a situation for, a guy like Tom Izzo that has historically always been about, building the program, these 3 and 4 year guys, they stay with the school. By the time they get to that junior, senior year, they're kind of built in the Michigan State way, as cliche as that may sound, whether you believe it or not, those days are done. I think it's going to be very rare to see, a guy like Jaden Akins that's, about to graduate from Michigan State that's going to have stuck with the team for 4 years. I think you're just going to see some continue, bouncing back and forth between schools, which is great for the player. And, I'm all about player promotion and wanting them to get paid and make sure that they're earning every dollar because you damn well know these schools are making millions and millions of dollars off of their backs. But there's got to be a better way to do this. There just has to be, whether that's a, contract commitment like we've talked about previously, where the player signs with the school and that locks them in for 2 years. That way, these coaches aren't in the middle of a Elite Eight run worrying, I wonder who the hell's reaching out to guys on my team. And, this is just a sad state of college sports. And, I think we saw a little bit the result of that this year when you look at March Madness and what happened, where there wasn't a ton of upsets. Look, it's the first time ever in NCAA history that all number 1 seeds have made it to the Final Four. That's not surprising given that all 4 of those schools are heavily invested in NIL. And you look at all those small schools, right? Using my, good old Hoosiers analysis, one of my favorite movies, like we're going to do this for all the schools that, could never make it here. All those schools have now been robbed and ripped of those players because those players are getting offered more and more money to go be backups for a bigger time school. And that's just the reality of where kind of college sports sits. So I think March Madness for me this year didn't have as much flair and excitement. I didn't feel like the games were that great. It was the have and the have-nots. And I think that's what you're going to continue to see. So I was just kind of disappointed and bummed to see that. But we'll see what happens. Is Tom Izzo going to embrace, NIL and, these 1 year kind of deals, for lack of a better term, for players? That's what he's going to have to do. Dusty May has already been hard at work this week, getting some players through the transfer portal. Michigan's got the dollars to be able to do it. And Dusty May is kind of flexing some muscle there. And look at a school like St. John's, right, which paid a ton of money. There's rumors that Louisville is going to be pouring $8 to $10 million into the portal, trying to get these guys to come to their school. And so we'll see what happens. Just speaking from a fan perspective, I wish they would find a way to fix this, because if they don't, I think you're going to lose a lot of fans because you're just going to continue to dilute the game. And, you're telling fans that there doesn't need to be a super tight tie to the school because the players don't really give a damn anymore. And they're going after what they want to go after, which again, all about player empowerment. I just think there's got to be a better way to hold some accountability and create some consistency in the program. So year to year, you don't have guys jumping and going to different schools. So all in all, great year for Michigan. Great year for Michigan State, considering where they were to start the year. Hopefully bright things ahead. We'll see what happens with NIL. But that's my 8-minute rant on college sports, coming from an old man perspective, because that's how I feel sometimes when I talk about some of my frustrations. But anyways, moving on to better and brighter things. With March Madness now behind us, we have entered April in the D. So we have the Detroit Tigers have officially kicked off the season. Tough series start against the LA Dodgers. You want to talk about the have and have nots. The Dodgers team is pretty good. Swept the Tigers to start the year. I thought the Tigers played really, really well in that series. They had a couple games where they were super, super close to cracking through. I think they were 0 for 18 in their first 2 games with runners in scoring position, which, let me tell you, anybody that's been listening to the pod, I was pacing. I've been sending texts to my friends saying, I don't know how the hell I'm going to make it 162 games. But yet, here we are, coming off of another tough loss tonight, unfortunately, in Seattle. So Tigers get swept by the Dodgers, start the season 0-3. They go to Seattle. They take the first 2 games. You got Scooble on the bump today. We're thinking, all right, we're going to come out with a series win, even the record at 3-3, coming home for the home opener. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Tigers fell today 3-2. Scooble did not get a W. He's 0-2 to start the year. Not necessarily his fault. Got hardly any run support. Just some miscues today defensively. When it looks at Colt Keith, 2 outs, tries to throw one to second instead of going to first, ends up being late on the throw to first. Double that inning. Tigers lose 3-2. They mounted a comeback in the 9th, but weren't able to get it done. But we did pinch hit Javi Baez. Nice. That's when you know your team's rolling. But aside from my stress and frustration sometimes with the Tigers, let's kind of break down the season expectations here, kind of where the Tigers sit. We did cover a little bit on the roster breakdown last week. When you look at kind of major player acquisitions this year for the Tigers, for those of you that are close Tigers fans, I'm sure you're aware, but for those that may be more casual listeners and watchers of Tigers baseball, you know, I think fans expected a little bit more this offseason, as did I. I'd say the biggest moves that they made was re-signing Jack Flaherty to a 2-year deal, but essentially a 1-year deal with a player option for the second year for $10 million for a second-year option. He obviously sits behind Scooble in the rotation, so really, really nice signing there, considering you traded him at the deadline last year to get some really great youthful assets that are actually doing pretty well this year. Outside of that, you also signed the body of Alex Cobb, who is unfortunately hurt right now, so he will kind of hopefully be in the rotation at some point. Then you look from a player perspective. Gleyber Torres was the biggest kind of player acquisition coming over to play second base for the Tigers, came over from the Yankees. Decent defensive player, a little bit of pop in the bat, had a really, really nice playoff series with the Yankees last year, playoff run, I should say. Just kind of a, hit or miss type player. His bat, we needed that bat in the lineup. Tigers are really, really hurting for right-handed bats. Other big moves this offseason from a player acquisition standpoint. They did make some additions also to the bullpen. You added Tommy Kahnle coming over from the Yankees as well. Loves throwing that changeup pitch. He'll be an addition to the bullpen. You also have John Breba. He is a relief pitcher that came over to the Tigers as well in free agency. And then the rest of everybody else in the bullpen, Brisky, Hannafy, Holton, Herder, Maeda, and Will Vest are all guys that we're kind of familiar with. No other major changes from a roster perspective in terms of additions this year outside of the pitching staff and Gleyber Torres. Obviously, the Tigers were in on Bregman. Unfortunately, we're not able to get that deal done, which kind of left them scrambling. The biggest early storyline for the Tigers, and I think is going to be something that's really going to dominate the first quarter of the season, is going to be, unfortunately, the injury bug that we saw with the Lions feels to be creeping its way a little bit into Comerica Park, unfortunately, jumping across the street there near the stadium. But, Matt Vierling's dealing with a strained rotator cuff, which is not obviously what you like to see. Matt Vierling had a really, really strong year last year. They were depending on him to take some reps at third base, probably be the primary starter there, also some reps in the outfield. Unfortunately, he is hurt and banged up. The biggest one, though, is Parker Meadows. Meadows dealing with a very rare and unique injury, if you want to call it, but essentially he has a nerve in his elbow has essentially gone to sleep, for lack of a better term. Best way to describe it is, you kind of wake up in the middle of the night and you got, that I've been laying on my arm and, the elbow gets a little numb. You throw that bad boy over the side of the bed and next thing you know, you get a little blood flow moving and now the elbow's back. That's obviously not what happened to him, but his nerve has essentially, kind of fallen asleep or is not activating in his elbow, which is making his ability to throw the ball impossible, which means he is currently on the injured list for the next 60 days at least, which is, Parker Meadows is vital to this team. He is one of the best, if not the best, center fielder in all of baseball in terms of his defensive ability. He leads off your lineup, his ability to get on base, ability to steal bases, and is just that guy you can count on every single day. And I think last year when the Tigers, when Parker Meadows was in the lineup, when he came up from AAA, they won 40-some games. I think with him in the lineup, he was a major, major reason for their turnaround last year. So just an absolute bummer to lose him to a kind of a very, odd injury. So we will see what shakes out from that. Hopefully he'll be back, but the reality is there's not really a great timeline for something like that. It's not, a broken leg or a strained muscle where you kind of know, hey, it's going to be six weeks or 12 weeks or what have you. They just got to wait till this nerve wakes up. So, Aiden Hutchinson cracks his leg in half. Parker Meadows has a nerve falling asleep. Like, I don't know what's going on in the water here in Detroit, but we got to do something to try to fix this. So, okay, Parker Meadows is out, no problem. Wencel Perez is going to step into center field, should be able to take over there, except Wencel Perez, second to last game in spring training, tweaked his back. He's dealing with a back injury now, so he did not make the trek north as well. So you got, Meadows, Wencel Perez, and Matt Vierling all down right now, which is unfortunate. And Gleyber Torres in the third game of the season hit his first home run for the Tigers, which is great. Appeared to tweak his oblique on the swing, which means he unfortunately is on the 10-day injured list as well. So you have four contributors that we're going to see starting time that are unfortunately not with the Tigers right now. And I think that's the early storyline right now is, can they maintain enough through the first quarter of the season until they get some reinforcements to not get in such a big deficit that they can't mount a comeback? What happened last year with these Tigers and pitching chaos is once in a generation type run that you will see. If fans are sitting there expecting that to happen again, good for you. I just don't think it's realistic for that to happen. But this team is scrappy. And I think we've seen that through the first couple of games of the season. It's the Zach McKintries, the Andy Ibanez, the Spencer Torkelsons of the world, the Riley Greens, the Kerry Carpenters, the Jake Rogers, Dylan Dingler. Those are the guys that are going to ultimately carry this team, Colt Keith. And that's what they're going to have to rely on, is kind of these gritty wins. And I hate to use the word gritty because it describes the Lions as well, but I can't think of a better word for this Tigers team. They're just scrappy and they're just never out of it. And I think that comes from AJ Hinch without a doubt. My concern early on is, can that scrappiness iron out and win some of these 3-2 games like they lost today? They're going to need that big hit. They're going to need to have all those guys hit the singles and doubles and a couple bombs here and there. If they're able to do that and kind of keep the momentum going and to keep the ship stable and at least above water till they can get some of these guys back, I'm very, very confident the Tigers can have a great, great season. their pitching staff is going to be their strength again. It is going to be the greatest strength of this team. When you have frontline starters, Tarek Skubal, defending Cy Young winner, Jack Flaherty, defending World Series champion who had a great year last year. When you have those two guys at the top of the rotation, followed by, Reese Olson, Casey Mize, those are strong starting pitchers. And then you throw in a guy like Jackson Jobe, kind of the young rookie of the group, but a lot of great potential. This team is going to be led and will go as far as starting pitching goes. You're probably thinking, well, yeah, no shit. If your starting pitchers stink, your team stinks. Yeah, but if you have okay starters and a great offense, it can hide a lot of warts. The Tigers don't have a lot of makeup here. The warts are going to show pretty quick if the starting pitching starts to fall off. They're not going to be able to necessarily produce a ton of runs, which is going to put pressure on the pitchers, put pressure on the bullpen, and they're going to have to try to be as defensively sound as possible. But I'm still confident in this team because of AJ Hinch and what he has built and the motto that he runs with this team on, and the energy and the enthusiasm, and also Chris Fetter, the Tigers pitching coach. Those two men together can lead this team to where I think they need to go. The question is that going to be good enough for them this year, for them to get back to the playoffs? If you look at kind of the standings for kind of where the Tigers finished last year, so they finished with 86 wins last year, 86 and 76, obviously ended up clinching a wild card spot, end up winning the first series against Houston, then have a nail biter against Cleveland. Vegas odds this year has them at 82.5 wins. So, 4.5 win loss reduction heading into this year. If you look at kind of the AL Central, overall, and kind of where things are probably going to shake out is, the Tigers are in I think a unique position in the sense that if you look at just kind of the division overall, you have the White Sox coming off an absolute horrible year last year, really an embarrassing year. You have to think they can only get better because of how bad they were last year. But if you look at White Sox had 41 wins last year and 121 losses, which is horrible. If you look at the other teams, the Twins, Royals, Guardians, and Tigers, none of those teams really did a whole hell of a lot in the offseason. I think the Tigers added the most free agency money this offseason, which is not saying much because Cleveland's pretty cheap, Kansas City's pretty cheap, and so is Minnesota. I think it's just going to be a dogfight to see who's going to win this division. If it's going to be, are the Twins going to be able to keep it together? Can the Tigers kind of mount the comebacks that they had last year in the Royals and the Guardians? I mean, you look at this division right now, and we're 6 games in, but all 5 teams are 2-4. So that's probably how this thing is going to continue to shake here for a couple weeks, which as long as the Tigers can stay within striking distance, that's ultimately what I care about, because this team has playoff expectations now. And I have those playoff expectations because of the run that we had last year. And I think that's fair. And I think that's the accountability we need to be, holding our teams to. If I had to break down, I was thinking, how do I preview the Tigers outside of the players and who's here and who's gone? And I would say there's probably three pivotal points, 3 factors that I think will impact how successful the Tigers are going to be this year. The first is going to be, can the starting pitching staff hold up? Can Skubal repeat what he did last year? Can Flaherty also repeat what he did last year? And can the back end of that rotation with a guy like Jobe, Mize is starting to show some flashes, and whoever's going to be kind of that third starter, is it going to be Olson, Alex Cobb when he gets back? Can those guys pitch to the level that they pitched last year? If that answer is yes, they can. And, Skubal, I just naturally think he will have some drop off coming off the year he had last year and just how great he was. I think he is a human, which is okay. It doesn't mean he can't have a great year, but health for that starting pitching staff is kind of number one with the bullet that I think is ultimately going to determine the success of that team. The number 2 area for me is going to be, who's going to be the guy on this team that's going to rise to the occasion. And I'll tell you what I mean by that, just kind of looking at this roster. You look at a guy like Riley Green. I think you know what you're going to get from Riley Green. All-star representative last year. He's going to play good defense. He's going to hit some home runs. He's going to hit, probably that 250 range, give or take, right? He's going to have his homers. That's what Riley Green is going to do. I'm confident in Riley Green. A guy like Kerry Carpenter, can he take a step forward? Can he become the player that we think he can? Is he able to hit left-handed pitching and right-handed pitching, right? A little bit limited right now when they can play him. It's really, to me, though, going to come down to, is a guy like Torque going to step up? So far this season, he has. So far this season, he's playing well. He's hitting .318, OPS of .990, slugging of .545. He's got 2 RBIs, which is great. 7 hits. He's got, 1 home run already. He had a really nice kind of opening to the series. I think he went maybe 4 for 12 during the series with Seattle. And I've given Torque a lot of shit. And everyone reminds me how much I give him shit. I don't know if I give him more shit or Hendon Hooker. It's up there with those two. If a guy like Torque or a guy like Colt Keith, one of those two guys can rise to the occasion and accelerate the bat even more and be that filler in the lineup that we need, that is going to have massive impact on this team, because there is just not enough bats to go around right now. There is not enough hitting on this team in those slumps, in those moments. I equate it to like a Michigan State, right, where they're having that 3 to 5 minute scoring drought. And it felt like it happened to them every year this year, or every game this year, where they would just have some of those bouts. And every team does. For the Tigers, it's a series like you just had in LA when you're 0 for 18 and with runners in scoring position. They're going to need someone to rise up and step up and get that big hit and get a couple big hits. I'm looking at a guy like Torque, a guy like Keith. Can a guy like Torres continue to deliver like he did with the Yankees? That's going to be really kind of determine the success overall of this team. And do I like the way Torque has played the last couple of years? Nope. Did I think he was going to be on this roster? Nope. Did I want him on this roster? I did not. You know why I didn't? Because he's done jack shit. He had one good year, and last year in the playoffs, and toward the end of that season, he did not look like a major league player. And so the fact that we are now depending on him as, hitting fourth of our lineup is scary as hell, because I don't know what you're going to get out of him. But if that guy can turn it around, I'm going to be his biggest fan. Call me fair weather. Call me what you want. I don't care. I'll be yelling for Torque as my 1901 season ticket holder member, because that's what you do for your own hometown team. So I hope Torque proves me wrong. Spence, if you're listening, please prove me wrong. I'd love for you to be great. Please make this Tigers team good. And third on this team, starting pitching, who's going to step up from a batting perspective? Third is going to be AJ Hinch for me. And why do I say AJ Hinch? AJ Hinch last year pushed damn near all the right buttons, from going to the pitching chaos, from pinch hitting in unique situations when you didn't think we maybe should, and stats would show maybe it didn't make sense, but he did it. Hinch had a pulse on this team last year that I've never seen in baseball from a manager. He knew this team, he knew the guys that he had, and he knew the best way to deploy them. If the Tigers are going to continue this kind of lower investment, believe in the youth, believe in kind of the sum of all the parts versus the individual parts, which is how the Tigers play, darn near every single game, there is no bat left on the bench, other than maybe, Dylan Dingler or Jake Rogers, whoever doesn't start just in case of an emergency situation. If you are on this team, you are going to play. And can AJ Hinch squeeze out every ounce of talent this team has to get them back to the playoffs? Do I think they are lacking talent? Yes, I do. Do I think they needed to add another bat this offseason? Yes. Maybe 2 bats? I do. Did that happen? Did not. AJ Hinch is going to have to work some magic, and he's got the starting horses in the rotation to do it. It's going to come down to how does he work the positional players in the bullpen. And if AJ Hinch is able to do what he did last year, or at least close to it, I have no reason to believe this team cannot be in the same position that they were last year. Hopefully a little bit earlier on. You don't have to go on a once-in-a-generation run. But we will see. I think AJ Hinch is a great manager. I think he's great for this team. And, hey, maybe around the trade deadline, they're close. Scott Harris decides to pony up a little dough, go after some guys, see what we can do, and maybe put this team in a position to win a division. And now you're hosting a playoff series, which would be huge for them, because I think Comerica Park can be a tough place to play when you have a good team, and we saw that in the heyday of the Tigers. So overall, I'm excited for this year. I love baseball. I don't know how I'm going to make it 162 games or 158 or 156, whatever it is now. And I kind of like the fact that I'm so stressed early on in the season, because it means I care. When I'm mad that they're losing, it's because I have expectations, and expectations means there's a reason that you had those expectations, because this team should be winning. And instead of being scared or afraid of that, I'm going to lean into it, because that's what you do, right? Enjoy the moment. And I'm hoping this year is great. I'm looking forward to opening day on Friday. My dad's going to be there. My sister's coming in from Ohio, which will be awesome. I can't wait to be down at Comerica, see all the fans. Hopefully it'll be a good day. You heard the pod last year with my dad. It's always a holiday in Detroit. So, hopefully the Tigers can get back to their winning ways, maybe sweep the White Sox, which would be great. Then you got the Yankees coming in afterwards with their damn torpedo bats. Torpedo bats. That's where we've come to in baseball. That's a conversation for another week. For those that haven't seen this torpedo bat, which is kind of a manipulation of the bat by putting wood on the bat in the place where the batter generally hits the most contact, it creates a bat that somewhat looks like a bowling pin, which is super fascinating. Not sure how it's legal, but somehow it is. So if you're seeing odd looking bats out there from players on the Yankees or some other teams, that's the torpedo bat. It's like the torpedo drink that they used to have at Comerica Park, or the bat drink, right? It looks just like that, except they're hitting baseballs with it. So anyways, yeah, we'll see what happens with the Tigers. Fingers crossed for a good year. 82.5 Vegas odds wins. I'm going to go with 87 wins. I think the Tigers surpassed the wins from last year, and I'm doing that just because AJ Hinch, I believe in AJ Hinch, and Spencer Torkelson's going to prove me wrong. So we will see. So yeah, Tigers opening up on Friday. Hope everybody watches and tunes in. I'll be down there, and yeah, looking forward to it. As we transition away from having expectations for your team, we now migrate over to the one team in this town that doesn't appear can get their shit together, which is going to be the Detroit Red Wings. Shouting out my buddy Mike Walsh, also known as the Dead Wings again. Have we really re-entered the Dead Wings? The Dead Wings era? Oh, shocking to think that. So where are we at with the Red Wings? First of all, this pod once again jinxed the Red Wings. If you recall, I think it was maybe early February, we came on and said, Tigers were about to start and the Red Wings were rolling and the Pistons were rolling. I talked about how Todd McClellan was off to one of the hottest starts as a coach that we've seen with the Wings, that they were playoff bound. They were moving well and looking good. Unfortunately, since that time, things have pretty much absolutely gone into the gutter. So where the Red Wings sit now, they have 8 games left. They have 75 points. They are currently out of the playoffs. What a bummer. Playoff chances currently sit at 2.3%. Can we get a Tigers-like comeback here with 8 games to go? Since February, unfortunately, the Red Wings are 4-10-1, which is just brutal. Unfortunately, 4-10-1, which is second worst in the NHL. In that time, which I think is the most fascinating, is they've only scored 38 goals which is actually the 5th worst in the NHL. And they have 48 goals against, which is actually 14th in the NHL. So about, midway in the league, call it. The problem with this team has been they cannot score. This team cannot score when they need to. And when they do score, their goalies give up 5 goals and they lose 5-4 or what have you. Just doesn't feel like they're able to put it together. I think what happened here is you had a new coach boost, which happens. It happens in sports. We see it frequently. New coach comes in, the players respond extremely positive. You end up seeing this, hey, we're going to, win this one for the coach. I think you saw that with Todd McClellan. He came in. It was clear that, under Derek Lalonde, they were just struggling. The locker room was not where it needed to be. And Dylan Larkin was stressed. You could see it in him. You could see it in his body language. And they played so well when Todd McClellan took over. And then you just look at these last, 2, 3, 4 weeks, and they've just looked like a completely different team. And they look like the team that, floundered in the middle of last year, and they look like a team that has started to flounder again. And if you look at kind of why I think that's happening, like I said, their ability to score goals hasn't necessarily been the problem in that time frame. It's been that their ability to stop the puck has not been as challenging as it has been to score the puck. And if you look at kind of where, from a player perspective, you look at a guy like Lucas Raymond, who you're depending on this year. He's played 74 games, has 73 points. If you look at where he was last year, he played 82 games. Obviously, we only have 8 games to go, but he scored 72 points. So with, a handful of games to go, rest of the season, 8 games left in the regular season, and, he's already hit his point total from last year. I think that's a positive step. You'd like to see a little bit more room there, but okay, if he finishes off with, call it, 80 points, whatever it is, he's averaging about a point a game right now. Okay, 7 to 8 point improvement from last year. He obviously got the big extension this offseason. I still think you need to see more from Lucas Raymond. He has these stretches where he just goes quiet, but he, to me, has lived up to where we need him to be this year. You look at another guy like Alex DeBrincat, has 62 points this year through 74 games. Last year he had 67. So again, on pace to surpass where we were last year. Then you look at our captain, Dylan Larkin, 62 points in 74 games. Last year, 69 points in 68 games. So about a point a game player last year. He's trending, about 12 points under that this year. So definitely has been, I'd say a step in the wrong direction for Larkin. I wonder how much of that is the stress, the weight he's been carrying, the guys that he's playing with. But, when I look up and down this roster, it's a guy like Vladimir Tarasenko, who's got 10 goals and 21 assists. He's got 31 points, got a massive 2-year deal this offseason. He's plus minus, he's minus 14. A guy like Marco Kasper, hard to give him a tough time. He's got 15 goals, 15 assists, 30 points. He's a young kid. You feel pretty good about him. It's the back end of this roster is where I think Steve Yzerman has just absolutely failed. And I think just the depth signings he's made for this team and the veterans that he's tried to bring in have just not worked. They just haven't. JT Compher has not been a difference maker. Andrew Kopp has not been has just not been a difference maker. Unfortunately, the Michael Rasmussens of the world, the Joe Velenos, the Tyler Motts, the Jeff Petrie, the Christian Fischer, just those guys have not worked out. The Justin Hall that he signed to a horrific deal when he first joined the team. There is egg on Steve Yzerman's face, and you can put it on the players, you can put it on the coaching staff. This one falls on Stevie. His ability to draft elite, his ability to develop homegrown talent, in my opinion, great to elite. His ability to sign and make great trades has been weak since he's been with the Red Wings. His greatest trade has been Alex DeBrincat, who was a hometown guy that came over from the Senators. He knew he wanted to get out. He told the team he wanted to get out. He forced the Senators' hands. That was a homegrown kid that wanted to be here. When I look at this roster outside of that, tell me where the external talent comes from. It's not like this team is cash or strapped for cash. They're close to the the salary cap. This is not a spending issue in terms of total amount that they're spending. This is asset allocation has been poor. And there's no one else to look at other than Steve Yzerman. This team has not made the playoffs in 8 years? 9 years now it's coming up? What is it? Ken Holland's famous, it takes 10 years to go through a rebuild. I just don't believe that. And, there's this Red Wings team, they didn't do anything at the deadline, which I understand because they went into a cold streak again right before the deadline. Yzerman didn't want to pull the trigger. And all you keep hearing is that Steve does not want to have any type of deal with term. He's afraid to give out term. And so you see these free agents that sign these 7, 8, 9-year deals in the offseason. Steve, that might be what you got to do, because what we're doing right now is not working. This bargain bin 1 to 2 year deal while we wait for the youth to come up is just, it's not delivering the results that we need fast enough. Steve Yzerman came in here to be elite. He is not a great general manager. He was an elite general manager. That's the reputation that he came in with. Are we seeing elite results right now? And that answer to me is no. The ingredients that these coaches are forced to cook with outside of some top-heavy guys have been pretty shitty. Free agent acquisition has been a major, major failure for the Red Wings. They haven't gotten the right talent. They haven't gotten a talented guy, and they haven't gotten the right guy that this team needs. Have there been some, positive signings? Well, yes, of course. There's always going to be 1 or 2 guys that you look at and say, sure, that was, look at a guy like Jake Wallman, who they ended up trading last year that's having a great year. Why'd they trade him along with, a second or third round pick? Couldn't tell you. Shane Gostisbehere, who they did not re-sign, also having another good year, not in a Red Wings uniform. Instead, you got a guy like Tyler Mott, not having a great year. Christian Fischer, Jeff Petrie, these other guys, I know they dealt some of these guys at the deadline too, but just the free agency acquisition has been bad. And then you also look at the goalkeeping, which has not been any better. Where's Sebastian Kosa? Cam Talbot, not been great. Pete Mrazek? We traded for Pete Mrazek? What? Why are we doing that? He's got another year on his deal. So you got, 47-year-old Cam Talbot. You got, Pete Mrazek that has just been a cancer in every locker room he's been in. Then you have the off-injured Alex Lyon. Those are your 3 goalies. Yet you have one of the top goalie prospects sitting in Grand Rapids while your team is just, falling by the wayside, and just flailing all over the place. And it's like, if you're going to go with the youth movement, then let's go with a youth movement. Then it's kind of like the Tigers did last year after the deadline. They brought everybody up. Sweeney, they're like, we're bringing all these young guys up because that's just what we're going to ride. And I know hockey's different. I understand. My point is, why is it always that we have to be one way or the other, right? It's like the Lions do this too. We're all youth. We're all our own guys. We're all youth. We're all our own guys. Okay, can we mix in some veterans that we think fit? Great. Okay, so what do the Red Wings do? They have an extremely old roster right now. So all these guys that they've signed are now blocking this incredible youth and talent that we have, which has been the calling card of Yzerman. And so, it doesn't look like the Wings are going to make the playoffs this year based on where we sit. They have, 2.3% playoff odds. They got their schedule the rest of the way. They have the hardest schedule left in terms of strength of schedule in the NHL with 8 games left. Their strength of schedule is a, 0.62 winning percentage of the teams that they're playing, which is tough. They got they got to play the Panthers. They got another one against the Canadiens, which will be huge because they're chasing Canadians. They got the Leafs. They got the Lightning. They got the Panthers. They got the Devils, and they got the Stars. So just a really, really tough schedule, which is not going to do them any favors. And if they do miss the playoffs again this year, which barring some miraculous, comeback, we're going to be staring down the barrel again of an absolute flop the second half of the year. And I want to remind all the Hockey Town fans out there, we're not talking about Stanley Cups anymore, people. We're talking about making the playoffs. How do we get this team back to potentially winning a Stanley Cup? I know it's all crawl, walk, run. I understand that. In order to win the cup, you got to get in the playoffs. You want to get your team kind of fortified and hardened from maybe having a playoff loss and letting them know what it feels like. Fine. You want to sell that for me for 1 or 2 years? I hear you. It's my thing I've always said, right? You lose big, you lose small, you win big. Fine. I'll accept that. Guys, we haven't made the playoffs in 8 years? 9 years? I mean, are we asking for too much to make the playoffs? We're not talking about cups. I want cups. This is freaking Hockey Town. It's in the center of Little Caesars Arena, Hockey Town. Hockey Town reputation means that you should be playing for Stanley Cups. Do I acknowledge that Ken Holland made some horrific decisions at the end of his tenure? Yes. But we are well past Ken Holland. We are well past him, and Steve Yzerman's handprints are all over this team. And outside of the guys that we have drafted who have been good, they have not been great. We don't have a superstar that's come out of nowhere at this point. What do we have to show for it? A strong pipeline in the minors. So I don't mean to be too hard for Stevie. I love him as a player. Always will be our captain. He's never going to get run out of town. It's not going to happen. But we have got to start putting some accountability on him that it is make or break time. This is 2 years in a row now that you have failed to even make the playoffs. And I was thinking too, you look at a team like the Canadiens, and the Canadiens had 76 points last year and missed the playoffs. They have 79 points right now with 10 games to go. And they are, at this point, it looks like they are, in a great position to make the playoffs. It's how do you get the Red Wings to have that type of a turnaround? Look at the Ottawa Senators too. Look at where they were, last year to where they sit now. They're the first wild card team with 84 points. I mean, this is where the Red Wings have to look at this and say, these teams are losing, going through a rebuild, and now ascending again faster than the Red Wings have, who have been in the midst of one of the longest rebuilds in the NHL over the last, 7, 8, 9 years. And so that's where I just, I feel for the Red Wing season ticket holders. I feel for, the diehard Red Wings fans that go down to Little Caesars every night, because it has not been a good product to watch. And if we learned anything from what we've seen with the Lions, what we're seeing with the Pistons, with the right mix of guys and the right player, additions to a team, you can turn this thing around. I just hope that Stevie can find the confidence I think it's time to make a big move. It's time to put some chips in the center of the table and, put the Wings in a position to be back to win a Stanley Cup and not just fighting to make the playoffs. And I would like to see that from Steve. So Steve, I know you're listening. Mr. Yzerman, Stevie Y, the captain, and his perfect human, Nick Lidstrom, also part of the front office, Chris Draper. Guys, I need to see more. I want to see more. I expect more. So we'll see what happens here. Maybe the Red Wings can pull, rabbit out of the hat here these last 8 games. Lost a nail biter last night, up 1-0 till 30 seconds to go against St. Louis. St. Louis ties it with 20 seconds left. Red Wings lose in overtime 2-1. Drop another point behind it in the wild card standing. So as it sits right now, they have 75 points. Montreal's in the driver's seat on that second wild card spot with 79 points. Red Wings do have 1 game left with Montreal. So let's say they win that game, that takes them to 77 points with Montreal at 79. They're going to have to get some dubs here coming down the stretch with the hardest strength of schedule left regular season. So we'll see what happens. Good luck, Wings. Come on now. Pull it together. So talked Wings, talked Tigers, talked Michigan State. Got to wrap here with our beloved Detroit Pistons. Again, it's April in the D, folks. Regular season is coming down to the end here. How about your Detroit Pistons? Sit it. This stat to me was honestly just kind of crazy when I think about it. At 42 wins, the Pistons have now set an NBA record as they are the first team in NBA history to triple their win total from the previous season. In the 28 game and counting increase in wins is the 7th largest ever from the previous season. Just incredible turnaround for the Pistons. They're currently sitting in the 5th seed as of tonight, so they're 42-33. Just a little update on the seedings. Cavs are number 1 in the Eastern Conference with 60 wins. Celtics are 4 games behind them. The Knicks are 12 games behind them, sitting at 48 wins. Then you have the Pacers sitting in the 4 seed with 44 wins. Pistons are in the 5th seed at 42 wins, and Bucks are in the 6th seed at 41 wins, and then Magic, Hawks, Heat, and Bulls after that. So Pistons are 1 game clear of the Bucks right now. Bucks are obviously dealing with some injuries with Damian Lillard being out with some of the blood clots. They say he's going to be back for the playoffs, which will be absolutely huge for them. But the question is now, the Pistons are pretty much either going to fall into that 5 or 6 spot. They could catch the Pacers in the 4 seed, but at that point, you're still playing the 5 seed, so it won't change kind of who they're going to play necessarily as much. It could be where are they going to play. Is this going to be a game that you're going to have that home court if you get into that 4 seed, or is it going to be that 5 seed where you're starting off on the road? Either way, just an incredible turnaround for the Pistons. There's been some tussles this last week, right? A couple suspensions the other night. Isaiah Stewart, Ron Holland, Marcus Sasser, JB Bickerstaff got booted from the game, ultimately get some suspensions. I think it's one thing we got to watch out for the Pistons is they're starting to develop a reputation around the league where they're starting to get some whistles called on them, especially look at a guy like Isaiah Stewart. I think he's been suspended, 7 times now, I think. Joe Dumars, who's head of NBA kind of player discipline, ended up handing him down a 2-game suspension. Guy like Ron Holland's got a little bit of dog in him, which you got to absolutely love it. But, as we get into the playoffs here, I don't want the Pistons to lose that edge. I love the fire that they're playing with. It's just, those whistles are not going to start going your way if you start kind of developing a tough reputation. But, you look at every good Pistons team we've had. They were talking about this on the radio the other day. It's like the bad boy Pistons, win back-to-back titles, going to work Pistons, kind of that Rashid Ben, right? They were a tough defensive team, punch you in the face. They win a title, go to the finals, right? 7 straight Eastern Conference finals or whatever it was. This team's not to that level, but they got some guys on this team, and I think Bickerstaff represents that the most of anybody. He really has that dog mentality to him, so I don't want them to necessarily lose that. I just think we got to be careful. If it's a playoff series and Beef Stew and Ron Holland start throwing punches, like there's going to be some suspensions that are going to occur. So let's just hope that does not happen. So boys, let's maintain the edge. Let's maybe just make sure we stay in the game. I would prefer to have you in the game would be great. And JB Bickerstaff, man, just love that guy. Just nothing left to say other than, man, what a hell of a job he's done. I hope he's coach of the year. We'll see. Kenny Atkinson may get it for the Cavs, but to me, it's a runaway with JB Bickerstaff. But we'll see what happens with the Pistons here. A little bit of injury concern going on right now. I don't know what is going on with this injury bug, people, but Cade Cunningham dealing with a calf contusion. He's been out for, I think, 4 or 5 games now. Tobias Harris is dealing with some kind of Achilles tendonitis inflammation, so he's been out a couple games too. My hope is they're playing it smart with Cade. They know the playoffs are coming. They've gotten some really big wins, even with him off the floor, which I think is good for the other guys. But we got to see ultimately what's going to happen here. I'm hoping that everything turns out okay. Cade's healthy, but we need a full go Cade for the playoffs because he's absolutely our superstar. I was wrong. Just want to call it out to everybody. I was very hard on Cade. I didn't see it, hadn't seen it, challenged him, and he delivered, hands down. Maybe Torque will follow in the same suit, but I'm a man that's willing to admit when I'm wrong, and I was wrong with Cade. I was wrong with how I thought he didn't have it in him. I didn't necessarily not think he could get there. I just challenged him to do more, and I needed to see more, and damn did he deliver. And he's our stud. He's our superstar. Hopefully he turns into an all NBA superstar. You're hearing it in NBA circles, a lot of guys talking about him, how great he is. I heard a quote today where he said he wants to be the best player in the NBA and he believes he can be. And damn, do I love that. I love that confidence. So looking forward to hopefully seeing some, Pistons playoff basketball. We'll see what happens with the Red Wings and obviously the Tigers. So yeah, I'm out of breath, guys. We covered a lot. We're at 54 minutes, going on 55 minutes, just me talking Detroit sports. We have so much coming up in the next couple weeks. We got some guests lined up for you. We got the NFL draft around the corner. Hopefully we're previewing some Pistons playoff matchups. We'll give you some updates on the Tigers. I still want to run through some of the NFL rule changes. The tush push still exists. Some of Brad Holmes' comments head into the draft. We're going to have some Detroit Tigers folks on here to talk ahead of the draft and kind of where we see the Lions going. Detroit Lions folks coming on. So, yeah, we'll kind of see where we shake out. But anyways, I hope you enjoy listening to this episode. Steven, or at least Wilson and I will be back next week. I think Steve has a fun trip coming up with his family. So Steve, enjoy if you're listening to the pod tonight. But Wilson and I should be back next week. I'll give you some updates on everything else happening in the world of sports. So make sure, rate, review, subscribe, follow us on X, follow us on Instagram. We've been putting these videos up on YouTube. We appreciate all of your support. Listenership has been great so far as we are now officially past that 12, 13-month time frame of being live. Hope you enjoyed the episode tonight. We will be back on next week. And thank you for listening to another episode of Take the Points, a true underdog podcast. April in the D. That was my Wilson impression. All right, we out. See y'all.